Emotions Matter, brought to you by Emaww.com. That's EMAWW.com, your solution for emotional intelligence. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Emotions Matter podcast. Today, I've got another great guest with me. It is Slobodan, and Slobodan is a psychology student in Serbia, and he is focusing on the problems that the youth have. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, Jason. I'm glad that you invited me to your show.
Yeah, no problem. So I know a little bit about you. I know that you're in school studying psychology, and you've got a focus on the youth. And what else should I know about you? What else can you tell the guests about your background and why you're doing what you're doing?
Well, if we're going to talk about the professional part, currently I'm volunteering and psychology counseling for students, where I have an active influence in helping young people to overcome difficulties in everyday situations. And the most common problems that I'm dealing with are emotional problems, anxiety disorders, and communication problems. Well, that's the professional part, which is, I guess, interesting for the show. And on the other side, I have plenty of hobbies and all the things that are not strictly connected with psychology.
Sure. Well, what do you like to do for fun? I'm curious.
Well, I really like to drive a motorcycle, and I always like to say that everyone should have a hobby, and that hobby should be driving the motorcycle or maybe sports car, which is more expensive, but the motorcycle is the sweet spot.
Oh, yeah, very, very much. I'm a sports car guy myself, so I certainly understand that, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, what gave you the interest, or what made you want to focus on what you're doing with psychology of the youth? Where'd that all come from?
Well, I should come first from my experience, because you know when you feel something and resolve all your problems, not all but some problems, you see the process of making that I don't know how to say it, resolution, or when everything becomes clear, the moment when you overcome some problem. That would be the ideal definition of it. And I saw that potential in me, that I can help other people with the same problems. Not exactly the same, but the problems which are similar and have the similar mechanism of working. And so I kind of realized that it would be nice to, I don't know, try to help other people. And it was all before university, like in a talk with the friends and other people. And then I realized, maybe this is something which I'm good at, and maybe this is something that I should train a little more. So I went to university, and that's the whole thing which led me to this point of my I don't know how to say professional career. Maybe yes, maybe not, but sure, it's something which I do and will be doing in the future.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really, really good. I understand what you're saying, and yeah, I mean the power of touching others and helping others is always really, really satisfying. There's no greater gift or joy than to give. So what you're doing will allow you to do that, throughout your career. So I think that's great. Thank you for that. So when you work with the youth, what's the typical age range that you work with or that you've studied to this point?
Like we have the teenagers, like from, I don't know, 15, 16 years old teenagers, and like students, which are maybe 21, 22, 3. Like that's the number from 16 to 25. Let's say that's the most frequent age of people that I'm dealing with.
Okay. Let me ask you a question kind of about emotion specifically. Do you find that people in that group, is there like an emotion, or is there something that you see people struggle with the most, or is there something that comes out the most in that group, or is it kind of vary by age? So for example, are the younger people more prone to one emotion than the older group, or is it just really varied? I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, when there's young people, it's mainly the love problems. I can say the emotions which are strictly connected to love and to like all the problems which cause is the love, especially when the love is not between two persons equally, but. When there are students, the problems, I can say the problems are more complicated. Because there's a university and the exams and the anxiety, depression, and all those things that those people struggle, especially because that's the period of 2021. That years are especially critical for mental health for students, for people generally, because that's the period when all main pathological disorders come and may overcome in those people. I don't know if I'm clear, but the thing that I want to say is that's the period when schizophrenia might come.
Okay.
So that's a difficult period for every human being on the planet, not just the students.
Sure, that makes sense. So when you were talking about love, an example that came to my mind was maybe like a child wanting a father around, or a parent that maybe wasn't around. Is that a good example of that?
Yeah, but that's the problem in some occasion, but not very frequently, because this institution is more like for the mainstream problems with young people, which are not that strictly serious. It's more like the first step to psychologist, the first step to doctor, the first step to someone who can help. And so not all serious, I can say, serious problems are at our place, because when someone have a serious problem, he goes strictly to doctor. But when those problems are more like love related, I don't know, more like school related, with teaching problems and studying problems and all those things, that's the place where those students come.
Okay, that makes sense. So when I'm thinking about like children or teenagers, and we switch gears a little bit and focus on stress specifically, what do you see, or what have you seen trigger stress in those different age groups? For children, what do you typically see as signs, that stress is coming on? What may trigger that? And then kind of the same question for teenagers as well.
It's pretty tough, because I don't know how to say. There are many reasons and there are many triggers, but the thing that I met more often is that the problem is with school, with teachers. Like with exams, with all that pressure that that they have above their head, and that's the I can say the common problem. Of course, there are some other problems, but you know, if it can be I don't know how to say by law. It can be resolved by law. That's not our like interest. We are more interested in conversation with person with which has the more personal and more emotion related problems. I hope that I'm clear with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of the methods, or what are your normal courses of action to go about combating the stress that some of these guys experience? So, is there a one size fits all type approach to that, or is it really, really different on the individual, or how does that work?
Well, it works differently with the method of therapy, but on the other hand, it's strictly individual, because you can't approach to person with the same method. We're all different, and our problems are all different. So the main for me the main part is to listen really really good, and to try to emphasize that person and with its problem, and that's for me that's the key point at this resolving and overcoming problems. With the methods, I can tell, because you have the supportive method, which I'm now dealing with, and it's like in general, you are like support for those students, and you talk with them, try to overcome their problems, try to give them advice, and that's the main target which I'm personally dealing with. Also, I have the more experienced people there in our counseling, and they have methods, like some of them are Gestalt psychologists, some of them are behavioral, and so on. So that's the difference.
Gotcha. I'm a big fan of something you said. I'm not a believer in a one size fits all approach for anything. I really like what you said, how you guys, really look at what's going on and who you're dealing with, and that listening piece is really, really important too. So, I'm no psychologist, but I can tell you, with working with a lot of people myself, that's a great approach to kind of get into the root cause and figuring out what works. So, very nice, very, very nice. So,
thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. So, the next thing I want to talk about is anxiety. And anxiety is one of those things that I've seen people have anxiety attacks, and they can be very serious. And anxiety is really interesting to me, and I'm sure to a lot of the people listening. What's been your experience with that? Do you see a lot of youth suffer from anxiety? Is anxiety closely linked to stress? What's kind of your take on that?
Well, first of all, I would say that I have plenty of experience in personal anxiety, to be precise, because that's a very interesting thing, I would say, because there is a problem. Everyone has anxiety before exam, and that's exactly the problem which I had. So like 3 days from the exam, and you have all that fear which is like above your head, and I didn't know that was anxiety before university, and I always had that awful feeling which one is always there about me and always haunts me to, I don't know, like to study and be more to read more, and to study more. And like I was always it's a stress, but that thing was the anxiety, and that's I can say my personal experience. on the other side, the panic attacks and all those things that happens to occur to other people are like variations of that. You have the low grade of anxiety and the high level of anxiety. It's like I said, very individual. But I saw a few situations. Was present when those situations occur, and it was like. The main thing was to make a contact with that person, because when the panic attack comes, everything is black or everything is white, and like there is no contact with that person because she's afraid. She wants to go out. For example, I was with one colleague in the elevator, and he was afraid of the elevators, and the elevator stopped at one point, and he was all like, we're gonna die, oh, we're gonna die. But it was like experience which I will never forget, because the elevator wasn't going. I knew that it won't work again in a short period of time. So that's when my psychology skills, I would say, were on the scene. And then when I tried to pick the right words and to convince him that we are going to be good, because there is a plenty of hair and so on and so on. And it worked, because that's the thing, to make a contact and to rationalize the situation, because those people which have the panic attack, most often they don't see the real picture, and that's the main problem.
Well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your story with anxiety. And I'll tell you what, the elevator story takes me back to a time when I was a kid. I'm 35 now, and I was probably 10, so it's probably 25 years ago. But I was in an elevator with my dad, and it was an old cage elevator, and I got stuck between floors. And we must have been in there like 2 or 3 hours, but I was that person freaking out. We're going to die, the cable's going to snap. I was all messed up. My dad was real laid back. He was like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And it was fine, obviously, because I'm here talking to you. But it's funny, because as soon as you started telling that story, my mind went back there, and I was like, oh, yeah, I know what that feels like. Elevators don't bother me now, but at that time, I didn't see a way out. So as a kid, you can see how people panic so easily. So I really appreciate that, man. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, but the main thing there is to find that yourself, if you have it. If you don't have it, well, try to I don't know, assume what's the problem in the other person, and try to rationalize things, because in that elevator especially, there was no cables. It had those like high-end brakes, and I tried magnetic brakes, I think. Well, some parts I think that those parts were not true, but I needed to say them, because I needed to convince that person that everything will be okay. And I don't know, like said that those are emergency brakes, which are especially designed for that situation. And it was like, really, are those really like that? And I said yes, and that's the I don't know, like the words that I picked right at that moment, and the situation was better in the end.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Well, staying on the topic of anxiety, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. We actually have a question from one of our listeners. Scott from California, 26 years old, has a question for you, and he would like to know if people learn anxiety or if it's something that's predispositioned in them. So are they born with it, or is it something their environment teaches them? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know exactly. It might be the part of person, and I would say that it's the predisposition in person that mostly affect on how we will behave in some situations. And like the amount of stress, that I think that's the main reason of anxiety emerging, because if you have a big pressure, big stress, and it's going all above your head, and you are like, I can deal with this situation, and that situation occurs very, very, very often. Well, that's the main trigger. That's the main part that would occur anxiety. Although anxiety might be a very good thing. That's something that I haven't said in these 23 or 20 minutes, because anxiety is good for some situations. It prepares us to, I don't know, fight or flight, to run away or to stay, and be prepared for something which is going on, and to be more, our perception is more like concentrated, and our organism is more like in position for us to give faster response. And that's the thing with anxiety. It is biologically there in every person, but in some people it is more. Some people have the more predispositions for acting in that way. Some don't, but sure, it is not the thing which is, I don't know how to say, very, very bad for by default. Well, it is not.
Well, Slobodan, I appreciate what you just said, because I've never thought about that before. Anxiety can be terrible and great, depending on the circumstance. Very interesting, but I agree with you. I've never thought about that. And yeah, if we were always completely relaxed, I guess there's times where that would get us hurt or worse. So yeah, that fight or flight makes perfect sense and resonates with me. Scott, I hope that answer was good for you. I think that was great. Very, very interesting stuff. Well, let me ask you this. This is kind of a part two to that question real quick. It just popped into my head, though. If a person, from what you've seen, if a person is generally, has always been very anxious and struggled with anxiety, is it something that they can, I don't know if this is even the right word, is it something they can learn to minimize, or can they get it under control? Have you ever seen people make that swing from being very, very anxious to all of a sudden just kind of, doing the mind over matter thing and really getting it under control?
Well, it's a very good question that you asked. I'm glad that I've heard this question, because it's a very interesting thing. It's maybe the main thing to not to overcome the anxiety, but not to fall in that hole of anxiety and never to come out of it. You get it? Because when you have the anxiety attack, for example, what's happening? Your pupils go wide, your heart pumps by the higher rate, your adrenaline is like over 9,000, I don't know how to say, and all the things in that are like very, very anxious. That's the right word. But you see, when you have that situation, it's like the circle, because you hear your heart is pumping and you think, oh, my heart is gonna, I don't know, to stop and to run away or stop working because it is pumping very hard. And you think about that, and you think about all the other things, because you think that you're falling, or you think you are, I don't know, you're gonna pass out, and all those things. And that's the stress enhancer, and that's the problem, because every person which has these anxiety attacks She should realize and rationalize all the things, like sit for 5 seconds and think about something else, or have a deep breath and exhale slowly, and try to focus on things which are real and which are happening, and not those things that think that are happening. That's the biggest SOS help that person in the anxiety attack should get.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you to share with us a bit of a personal story. Maybe a situation where you had an emotional problem to solve, or maybe a tough moment. Give us an example of something you dealt with, what you felt, how you got through it, and then how you could kind of advise others to follow in your footsteps.
Well, I need to think about this for a second, because it might. I don't know, like the emotional problem. Well, those were the situations in a high school, maybe I would say. But there is one main thing, and which is very fresh for me, because in the past few months I've lost my father, and it's a catastrophe moment in every man's life, and it's deeply emotional, and it's like you need to find many ways to overcome that thing, because it's not like one thing. It's like many things that bring you back, and bring all the emotions back, and bring all the memories back, and you need to figure out and to find the way which is alternative, and that way you should follow, because there is always alternative. There is always something else that you could do to feel better, and that's maybe the main mechanism, but it's highly sophisticated, and you cannot use that mechanism in every situation, but the most of them, well, it works, and it works good, because it's not the end of the world. It's a very awful thing, but there are many beautiful things in the world which you can be concentrated on, and which you can follow, for example. So maybe that's the thing. I cannot go very deep with this thing, because it's really emotional, and it's like those are things which are just allowed for me to see. But if I can talk about that story, it will be like, this would be the barrier, and this would be the advice. That's the thing with the therapist. I'm going off the course a little bit, because when it's very tough to advise someone, because at the same moment you are bringing all the bad things inside your brain, and you are thinking about all those bad things, and the price that you should pay, that you're willing to pay, is that how deep you will go for advice for someone, how deep will you go into the emotions that you have about the certain event. And that's the thing which I'm trying to control. Sometimes it overcomes, and the emotions overcomes, and those are those sad moments when I cannot overcome and control the situation. But mainly I'm really, I can say, good with it. And on the other side, why am I telling that I'm good with it? Because it's maybe the most catastrophic moment for a young man to lose the figure who was there from his young ages, from the birth and so on, and in the certain point of life you don't have it, and that's really, I don't know how to say. The sad is not the sad is not a strong word for that.
Sure. Well, I'm sorry about your father, man. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm really sorry about that. I guess that kind of the lesson everybody listening is, everybody's human. Everybody's going to experience that extreme emotion, like he talked about, and he said, try to keep yourself occupied with other things and keep moving forward, and that's really what you can do in that type of situation. So I want to switch gears one more time, and I know you are graduating soon, aren't you?
Yeah, I hope so.
That's the plan anyway.
Yeah.
So after graduation, what's next for you?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I will go to educational therapist. Like there is a difference to going to therapist and going to education to therapist, because that's too different. The education is for psychologists which are willing to learn to be the therapist, and the therapy is like just only to resolve your problems. That's the difference, and I think I will go in that way, uh, which is therapy, and to learn and to be a certified therapist for, I don't know, like 4 or 5 or 6 years, because the whole process it took 8 years to be like on top of the hill, if you know what I mean. But after 2 3 years, you can start to have your own patients. It's a really long process, and it's a really, you go to deepest details and with your therapist and so on and so on.
All right, man. Well, that sounds great. I know that I certainly appreciate your time today. You've given us great insight. You've certainly exposed me to some new thoughts, so that's always a plus. I would love to expand my mind and always be challenged with new perspectives to look at things from. Really appreciate your time, my friend.
Thank you. And that's the thing that I do. I try to do every day, to expand, to think more, not to overthink. That's wrong, but to think more and to see the new horizons. And when you can see new horizons, you can see many new things that you haven't saw before, and to realize some solutions.
Okay. All right, sir. I appreciate it. You take care.
Bye.
All right. See you. All right. See you. All right. See you.